You know, that makes me feel just great. I really thank you very much. One of the reasons I volunteered to do this introduction is because of my admiration and my respect for the person I'm about to introduce. I'm not going to tell you anything about Leonard Nimoy, the actor. I think you all know something about that. What I am going to tell you is some things that you may not know. That in addition to his acting, Mr. Nimoy is an author and a poet. He's the author of 6 books, including 5 books of poetry, books of his photographs. He's a professional photographer as well. You also may have missed his hit album, which was entitled Leonard Nimoy Sings Mr. Spock's Music from Outer Space, which sold over 130,000 copies. So he's also a musician. He is also, aside from Star Trek, which everybody knows about, a very distinguished stage actor who's done very well as Sherlock Holmes. He had a one-man show that was very widely respected, a show on Vincent, a show about a different type of hero. Leonard Nimoy is also, and this was most surprising to me of all, a grandfather. He has a 3.5-year-old grandchild. He has 2 children in their 30s. And I should tell you that the buzz in Hollywood is and has been on Leonard Nimoy for some years, that when it comes to someone who gives his time to a variety of charities, goes out of his way to help people, is a gentleman in his work, Mr. Nimoy is exemplary. He has the kind of reputation that every actor or actress or every director would like to have, but very, very few of them do. But most importantly of all, and I think the main reason that Mr. Nimoy is with us tonight, is because he is, aside from his acting background, an outstanding filmmaker. Just look at his last 3 films and his range as a director. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, for which we just saw the trailer, is, in my humble opinion, and look, I'm a movie critic, I have to have opinions, I have to give them to you, right? Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home is by far the best Star Trek of the series, and one of the best science fiction adventure movies I think that has come out in this decade. And then he made 3 Men and a Baby, which is one of the most commercially successful films and a completely different type of film. Very few special effects, unless you include a baby urinating as a special effect. Very few special effects, and yet a charming comedy, a delightful comedy, that was a huge smash hit, the most successful movie of 1987. And then his most recent film, which is a film for which I feel a particular passion, is a film called The Good Mother. And I will tell you that long before I knew that I was going to have the privilege of sharing this podium with Mr. Nimoy here at Hillsdale, I was very proud to list The Good Mother on my Best of the Year list for 1988. It's a film that deserved a much larger audience than it received. A film that is as different from Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, as that film is from 3 Men and a Baby. Here's a man, as a director, who has shown that he can direct science fiction adventure and action, has shown that he can direct light comedy, and has shown a tremendous facility for directing a drama that raises some of the most important issues of love and parenting, and some of the difficulties of a single mother in dealing with sexuality, and with that sexuality potentially interfering with her role as a mother. I was very proud of the fact that, once again, long before I knew that I was going to be appearing with Mr. Nimoy here at Hillsdale, I said on the air that I thought that Diane Keaton's performance under Leonard Nimoy's direction in The Good Mother was the best performance that any actress gave in 1988. I still believe that. I think it's a shame she was not nominated for an Academy Award. And frankly, it's a shame that Mr. Nimoy wasn't nominated for the Academy Award he deserved as one of the best directors of the year. Having said that, we have lots to talk about concerning his films, the issues that they raised, and the entire question of Hollywood and its role within the popular culture. So to proceed to those questions, it is a very great honor to introduce a multi-talented and very gracious gentleman, Mr. Leonard Nimoy. You're supposed to take this chair right here.
Thank you. We're way ahead right now. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, I think this counts as a friendly crowd.
I would say so. Yeah.
Let me begin, if I may, at a sort of a difficult point, which is I know that The Good Mother is just out on video now, and it's doing very well on video, and it's number 10 apparently on the Los Angeles Times video chart. But when it opened in theaters, it was not a commercial success.
No, true.
And one of the things that I think some critics, not this critic, complained about in the film was the fact that despite that trailer, which is somewhat misleading, you didn't seem to really take a side on behalf of the Diane Keaton character who was fighting for the custody of her child, that you seemed to leave some of the questions open. The question that I would have is, would you say that that was an accurate description of what you were doing in the film? And having said that, would you do anything differently if you had the film to direct again?
Well, let me say that the audience response, or lack of audience for the film, was a major disappointment, a surprise to many of us, including the marketing people at Disney. When we were making the film, it was understood that it would be a film that had to be nurtured in the marketplace, that you couldn't just toss it out there in several hundred theaters and expect people to flock to see it, because it's a somewhat unusual film. We were hoping for critical and audience reaction to build gradually to an awareness of the picture, and that would hopefully draw an audience. By the time the picture was ready for release, the Disney marketing people were convinced that this procedure was not necessary, that there was enough anticipation for the film, enough of a want-to-see quotient for the picture, that they could go, as they say, broad and open in something like 800 or 900 theaters. And we hit a disaster. We hit a brick wall with the opening. I think the first weekend we did maybe a third, 25% of the business they had hoped to do. And by the end of the first 10 days, it was obvious the film was finished. It was coming out of the theater. I am still today reviewing some of the decisions we made, including content, the way the film was made, including what's in the movie. And it would probably be easy and comfortable in hindsight to say now that I might want to change some things for the sake of satisfying an audience. But I really don't think I would. I don't think I would. I set out to make the picture in a way which would give an audience an opportunity to respond to it based on their own prejudices, if you will. And I think that is still operative. I think the picture does that. The picture is a kind of a Rorschach test, in a way, and it has to do with each individual member of the audience's feelings about what is proper, what is correct, what is morally right, what is morally wrong, ethically right, ethically wrong in raising children and in making decisions about parenting and family. These are very, very sensitive issues. And what I'm surprised to find, what surprised me, is that there is that. People do come out and discuss from their own points of view what happened in the film and how they feel about that. And on both sides of the issue, they feel either that justice was done or justice was not done. That we expected. But what happens is that I find that if the film doesn't satisfy individuals' needs in terms of the way they thought the story should go, they're not angry with the society that creates that condition. They're not angry with the judicial system which creates that condition. They're angry at the film, you see.
It's easier to be angry at the film.
Yeah, well, that I find very, very interesting. And that surprised me. That really caught me by surprise. I thought we are doing a story about a particular lady, and we are doing a story about a particular situation, and we have established her character, and we understand the dilemma in which she finds herself, and we understand the reasons for it. They're all very clear. Now, when things go wrong, The audience would be much happier if Diane Keaton's character could function differently than she does, but she can't, because that is her character, that is her nature. The audience would like to see her, in this case she loses custody of her child, the audience would like to see her do or try to do something about it, even though it's futile, to sort of rise to the occasion as a heroine. This is not a heroic person. This is a lady who lives in Cambridge who is a particular lady with a particular background from a particular family. But the message that I'm getting is that the audience is saying, don't put us in that position. Don't put us in the position where we must experience with this lady this problem and not be able to do anything about it. Even try, even though futile, to do something about it. So that surprises me. And if one were to go back and remake this movie in order to make it commercially acceptable and successful, I think you'd have to do that.
What you're talking about is, people used to talk years ago about the Hollywood ending, that you would turn everything around, even tragic material. And I should say, this is a heartbreaking movie to watch. It is, for those who haven't seen it, and everybody who hasn't seen it, go rent it on video cassette. It really is worth renting. It's a terrific film. And one of the things about it is it takes you from an absolute luminous romantic high. There's a snap in the middle of the movie where it's almost nightmarish. And yet you realize that it's mistakes that the heroine has made, some carelessness that she's done. It's not something that comes out of left field. It is based on character, which is the best kind of drama, of course. With all that, do you suspect that if you had changed the novel, and it was based on a best-selling novel, and you had given the film, quote, the happy ending that everybody wanted, where Diane Keaton is reunited with her little girl, that the film would have had the commercial success?
Oh, I have no question about it. No question about it.
And yet you're saying that if you had it to do over, you wouldn't make that change?
No, that film wouldn't interest me. At this particular point in time, that film would not interest me. I did it because I felt the film was complex. I thought it was challenging and unusual, and those are reasons that I chose to do the picture. There were actresses who refused to play the role for the very reason we're talking about, because they did not have the opportunity to rise to the heroic occasion at the end and win out. I give Diane Keaton a lot of credit. If you look back over the body of her work, it is filled with complex characters of humanity and ambiguity and frailties. Diane is not an actress who goes into a film worrying about what the audience is going to think of her. She's only concerned about what is necessary to serve the character in the film. And if you think less of her at the end of the movie because you associate her with this character, so be it. But that, to me, is artistry.
Oh, what a great performance. The question, and this raises a larger question, and you'll pardon me for getting into this right away, which is, to whom is your highest obligation as a filmmaker? Do you visualize it? Is it to your collaborators? Is it to the novelist whose work you're adapting? Or is it to the audience that you're attempting to reach?
Well, I don't think, I think you've left out a key ingredient, and that is the studio that pays for it.
It's what's a few $1 million between friends, right?
It is actually their movie. It's their film. They own it, and they commission you to make it. And before you set out to make it, you'll have some pretty intense conversations with them about what this film is going to be about, how you see the film, what is your perception of this movie. And in this particular case, as you can imagine, it being a touchstone movie, and I think their first that was not of the 3 Men and a Baby commercial type, they were particularly interested and concerned in what I had to say about how I saw the film. It is to their credit that they never once said, let's soften this ending. Let's not go out on this painful note. We're essentially doing a tragic story here. They never once asked me to avoid that or change that or mitigate against it in any way. So in that sense, at least in the sense that you have a conversation with them before you start to make the picture, then you owe it excuse me, to them to try to hew to that concept. Then after that, the process takes over. You're in the process now, and your responsibility is to your actors, the script, the writers, and particularly to yourself, to try to see to for me, to give the film something personal, so that it is not simply a film that anyone else could have done. I'm trying to reach for some kind of personal touch in each of these films. trying to make some kind of a personal investment. And the audience is always in mind. If I'm doing a comedy, I want to hear laughter. I want that audience laughing out there. If they're not laughing, then I failed myself, I failed the audience, I failed the whole project. In The Good Mother, if they're not touched, I have failed. Now it's interesting that you ask about the novelist. I had lengthy conversations with her, Sue Miller, who wrote the novel. This was a best-selling novel, and essentially the film follows the path of the novel. The novel was much more dense in detail, which you don't have time to serve in a film. But I think essentially the film is true to the novel. I don't think she's seen the film yet, and I can understand why. I had lengthy conversations with her during the preparation, and one final conversation the day we started filming in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she lives, and she came on the set to visit. And on that day, I said to her, this must be a strange experience for you. Novelist, successful, first novel, now being made into a film, and you really have nothing to do with it, in a way. She didn't write the script, and she's not participating in the making of the film, so it must seem that it is sailing away from you. And she said that she had come to terms with it. And she told me an interesting story. She said that a good friend of hers had written Ironweed, the novel, and the screenplay. And she said he invited her and her husband to see the film at a preview screening, and they were very disappointed in the film. The novelist screenwriter thought the film was wonderful, but of course he was the novelist and the screenwriter, and he was very subjectively involved. She said what she discovered was that he doesn't know anything about making a movie. He knew how to write the novel, but he's not a filmmaker, and the film had no tension, no design, no form, no shape. It was formless. Anyway, she said, you people know how to make movies. I don't know anything about it. So you go and make the movie, and when the movie was finished and I invited her to come to see it, she said, oh, I won't be able to see this for a long time to come. And she said, I certainly won't be able to see it with you in the room. Because she said, the last thing in the world I want to do is when the lights come up, have to face you and tell you what I thought of it, you know. So she separated herself, which was very comfortable for me. You know, but yes, excuse me, just finally, in answer to your question, yes, I was trying to satisfy her as well.
Speaking of you being in the room when she saw the film, you know, it's one thing you always wonder about. You've had the experience of this phenomenally successful film, 3 Men and a Baby, which I think is your first film directed in which you didn't appear as an actor, first feature film.
That's right.
And with that film, was there one moment or one screening when you saw it for the first time with an audience and you realized, wait a minute, this is going to hit? What was that like?
I have a house in Lake Tahoe in Nevada, and the picture had shot well. We had finished a little bit ahead of schedule, and we had saved some money. And I asked the studio. Normally you would negotiate for this in advance, but I said I would like very much to take the editors with me and go to Incline Village, Nevada for a month and edit there. We'll rent some space and create some editing facilities. And if you would truck some stuff up, I have a house up there, and I think it would be helpful to all of us. And it cost them some money, in which they didn't owe me, but they said, yes, go and do that. So we spent a month, at the end of which time we had a cut. And we put together some temporary music tracks and so forth, and we brought in a projection system. And for the dual system, it's complicated. At that point, you don't have the film composited with the soundtrack, so you can't just go to your local movie house and stick it on their machine. We brought in the necessary equipment, and we announced in the village, in Incline Village, there would be a sneak preview of a film this coming Friday night or whatever, and the place was full, 400 or 500 people, and there were lengthy periods of time where you could not hear the dialogue because there was so much laughter. And people recognized me afterward and were saying things like, thanks, this was key, thanks for making me feel so good. And I knew that we had a potential monster on our hands. You know. People want to come out of a movie feeling good.
Oh, yes, they do.
And that's part of the process.
You know, speaking about that, this afternoon, one of the things we were talking about 3 Men and a Baby in the context of a series of movies that seemed to come out in 1987 that sort of returned America to its fascination and love affair with children, which hadn't been seen in movies for a long time. Were you conscious when you were making the film of being part of that? Was that
Well,
something in your
yes and
mind?
no. I was. The irony of it is that I was most concerned and conscious of one other film, which was starring Diane Keaton, called Baby Boom. Yeah. And when I saw it, I was very nervous for the first 10 or 15 minutes. I thought they're doing the same jokes. She's having trouble diapering this baby, and so are our guys. You know.
But it's funnier when guys do it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. But essentially, except for that very, very important difference, here was a lady who was unprepared, a person who was unprepared for it, having to deal with an infant. And so were our guys. I worried for the first 10 or 15 minutes. But after that, Baby Boom really went off in a whole other direction. And I realized that we had two entirely different films. And they were both successful. Baby Boom was successful.
Yes, it was.
In fact, it was the success of Baby Boom for Diane that was very helpful in getting me to, helping me to convince Disney that I should use her in The Good Mother.
But were you, I mean, I guess going back to this question, we've been talking a lot in the last 2 days when I've been speaking with people here.
About the babies.
No, about values, about films and values. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's no question that compared to a lot of the comedies that you've had earlier in the 80s and a lot of the films in general, that the values that one can take away from Three Men and a Baby were wholesome, reassuring, more traditional in terms of, was that a conscious aspect of your filmmaking at all?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say more traditional, because at the end of the film, you have a very non-traditional family structure. You have three fathers and a mother, and there's no marriage involved.
Right, the mother's not involved with any of them,
That's
apparently.
right. You have an entirely new kind of family unit. And she says, when she says at the end they've invited her to move in, she says, do you have room? And Sully says, I'll build you a room. You know, gets a big laugh. Everybody loves that. Very fresh, I thought, the ending in that sense. On the other hand, what I was shooting for, what I was trying for in the development of the script and the development of the characters, was to deal with a Peter Pan kind of syndrome with these three guys. Who just didn't want to grow up, and that's not particularly new.
No.
I think they did it very well, but the very concept, the concept of the decisions of what they did, the choice of their careers, for example. Selleck was an architect who had always been building things as a kid and was building bigger things as an adult. Gutenberg was in cartoon land, literally playing with childish figures and childish ideas, and Ted Danson was functioning in a profession which we literally call playing. He was playing roles. They were all children in that respect, and the structure was to put them in a position where they had to begin to feel some sense of responsibility for someone other than themselves.
Yeah, okay, Baby Boom, it's time to grow up.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
But actually, we were talking about this also before. I know that you inherited this project, you had mentioned before. To what extent did you change, alter, revise the script?
A lot. The script was very French when I came on the job. The script had been developed under a French director, the lady, Colleen Serrault, who had written and directed the French version, was on the job for Disney to not to write but to direct the American version. She had writers who were writing under her supervision, who were doing what essentially was a translation of the French film. So it was very foreign in nature. The tone of it was foreign. The nature of the characters I felt was inaccessible. It might have been an enormous success, but she left the project. I came on, and I had to do something that I could get in touch with. So we changed every word of the script.
Wow.
Just reconstructed the whole thing in a 5-week period.
In 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah,
yeah. And it worked out. But the two more questions about Three Men and a Baby. You'll pardon me, the one question that I had about it, the one thing about the film that troubled me a little bit, and it's something else that I spoke about earlier here, so I think in order to be honest, I should bring it up with you, was the subplot about the drug deal.
It would never go away. I just couldn't get it to go away.
But you wanted it to go away.
We tried desperately to find any other scheme. One of the most agonizing problems that I had to deal with was to find a way to play a scene where two supposedly intelligent grown-up guys like Tom Selleck and Steve Guttenberg hand over a baby, an infant, to two characters who are drug dealers, who come and say, "Where's the package? Give us the package. We're here for the package." You know, very difficult to pull off, I thought, and there was no complaint about it. I wouldn't have believed it if I said it. You know, I'd say, "Oh no, they're not going to give the baby away to these two obviously hoodlums." You know, but we got away with it. The audience's suspense of disbelief was enormous, enormous, and then we rewrote for weeks during the shooting of the picture the whole exchange where they go finally to get rid of these guys, to get them caught by the police. And we had it written under all kinds of circumstances, including a basketball game at the 5 of the plate, and the drugs are in the basketball. You know, I mean, it was, you wouldn't believe the permutations that this went through. It was, I wanted to deal with it as quickly and as offhandedly as possible and be done with it.
But I guess the question, I don't want to beat this to death, but here is as close as Hollywood comes ever to a wholesome family comedy. It's really something you can take your Aunt Tilly to see, and your grandmother, and little kids and everybody. And here, all of a sudden, in the midst of this film, is this subplot about criminals and drug dealing, and it gets pretty tense at certain moments. Did it ever occur to you or other people involved with the picture, wait a minute, we don't need that, why are we throwing...
Well, it's not that we didn't need, we needed some kind of device.
Yeah. We
needed a device where they mistakenly give the baby away. And that's what we were presented with. Under the circumstances, with all of the other facets of the film having to be changed, we ended up having to live with it.
Yeah.
It was the best we could do. We should have done better. We simply couldn't.
It worked out okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one last question about it, the famous scene...
But it's interesting that you say that this is a wholesome film to which you could bring your Aunt Tilly. Stop and think about what that says about what's acceptable today in a movie. Here's a child born out of wedlock, and the father doesn't even know the child exists. And the father comes home and says, "That's not my baby." And here comes the mother, and the mother has dropped the baby off on the doorstep without a face-to-face confrontation. You see, just dropped that baby off and walked away. All of these things are kind of shocking if you look at them in terms of what's acceptable behavior.
But that's today. Do you know that today, statistically, 20% of all American babies are born out of wedlock?
Well, I'm not surprised at that statistic, because doing my research for The Good Mother, I discovered that something like 50% of the children in the United States today are in single-parent homes.
Right. Yeah.
And growing.
Last question about 3 Men and a Baby to get us on a happier note. The famous scene where the 3 guys are singing "Goodnight, Sweetheart."
Yeah.
Was that scripted? Was that your idea?
No, it was scripted. Well, yes. No, it wasn't my idea. No, it was. I've forgotten whether it was in the original version or not, but it was in the script that I inherited.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. No.
I thought, how corny, you know. But we did it. Yeah. No shame.
Right. Listen, we're talking about movies, you know. It's not. Speaking of no shame, to just cover, so that we're doing justice to everything, to cover Star Trek IV for a moment. Vastly entertaining film,
Okay.
Another very successful film with a message. And the message being, to simplify it, save the whales. To what extent...
Or save the world.
True.
Yeah.
To what extent was that message important to you as a filmmaker while you were doing the picture?
Well, that was very important. It was very important. But I wanted it to be a fun adventure. I didn't want to be hammering people over the head with a problem. We had done 2 pictures, Star Trek's 1 and 2, or 3 pictures, Star Trek's 1, 2, and 3, all of which were pretty intense. There was a lot of dying. There was death and resurrection, if you will.
They couldn't get rid of Mr. Spock.
No. It was intense stuff, and I thought it was really time to recapture some of the fun that we'd had making the series, which we'd had very little of in the 3 movies. And I also wanted very much to do a film in which there was no particular nasty villain. that again, circumstances, lack of awareness, unconsciousness, whatever would create the problem. And given that we were going to do a time travel story, and given also that we were coming back to Earth now to find the solution to a problem that's taking place in the 23rd century, the question was what to come back for. What is it that's missing in the 23rd century that we need? I'd read a book called Biophilia, written by a Harvard biologist, in which he talked about the fact that by 1990 we will be losing something like 10,000 species per year off this planet, many of them never having even been recorded, discovered or recorded. And then when you start to lose species in that large a number, you have to be concerned with what they call the keystone species theory, which is that it's like a house of cards. You can take a card away here, take a card away there, and the house stands. But eventually, if you continue to take cards away, you will finally get to a card which is a keystone card. And that card will cause, the loss of that card will cause others to collapse and others to collapse and so forth down the chain. So the idea was that, that we had hit a keystone. And we now have, and the problem is developing in the 23rd century. We have to come back to the 20th century to find that thing and solve the problem. So are you going to come back for a mosquito? You're going to come back for a plant? None of those seemed particularly interesting visually, cinematically, you know. And when I struck on the idea of the whales, not only their size and the grandeur of them, but also the mysterious song that they sang that has never really been quite explained. We don't know exactly why they do it. And that led me to another interesting subject which always intrigues me, which is communication, or failure in communication. And I was just taken with the whole thing. And I started doing a lot of research. I looked at a lot of film of whales, and I contacted all the whale institutes. But you see, my consciousness had already been raised by the Greenpeace people. And I give them the credit. They're the ones who first put me in touch with the idea that people must do something about this. You know, I thought there was great drama years ago when they got out in their rubber boats and planted themselves out in the ocean between the whales and the whaling ships, and were in danger of being harpooned. Boy, that's dramatic stuff. Mm-hmm. So they made me conscious of this concern.
And have you had any indication from either the Greenpeace people or anyone else about the film's impact?
Oh yeah. I hear from them all the time. All the time.
What do they tell you?
That there's a big awareness, that I helped additionally to raise consciousness. I was invited to Russia when the film was finished, let's see, about a year and a half ago. Well, no, after the film was released here, about a year and a half ago I was invited to go to Russia to show the film in Moscow to help celebrate the event when the Russian government declared a ban on all commercial whaling. So there was an awareness even there.
The Soviets were quite late in declaring that ban too,
yes,
weren't they? Yeah,
that's right.
But you haven't been invited to Japan, which is still doing commercial whaling.
That's right.
That's the next step. You know, in terms of your work as a filmmaker and as an actor, are there certain kinds of issues, certain kinds of aspects of human life that you think movies, Hollywood, does not handle well, that simply don't lend themselves to effective treatment on screen?
Well, I don't know if I can answer your question directly. It does seem to me that that because of the nature of what the film is and what the concerns are in making a film, and particularly those concerns that I talk about with the good mother in the audience, that we too often find it useful to distort subject matter. I think Mississippi Burning is a big distortion. The picture was offered to me, and I couldn't do it.
The picture with the Chris Girolamo, with the script,
with
the
Chris
Girolamo
script, yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the job was offered to me, and I couldn't do it.
And why couldn't you do it?
Well, because I really didn't think that my presentation of the film, my vision of the film, was what the company wanted, or what an audience wanted.
How would it have been different?
I just couldn't do it. It would have been an entirely different movie. Alan Parker, who made the film, has said that the only way the film could be made is the way he did it, which is to make the film about white people doing the job. And that admission in itself tells me there's a major distortion, because that's not what the civil rights movement was about. So now, given that statement, there is this ongoing discussion about should one make the movie then? And of course, a lot of people say yes, because the film finally does say that repression is wrong. And that's a good thing. That's a good statement to make. I take issue with the television miniseries that was done called Holocaust a few years ago. I did not like it at all. I thought it trivialized. I thought it reduced to a rather pathetic level this gigantic event. And there are others who said, and I'm sure there's a truth in it, that getting it on the air was important because there were millions and millions of people who would not even have been conscious of what the event that the event took place, or what it was all about, or what was involved if they hadn't seen that miniseries. And I'm sure that's true. So you have to finally deal with these things on the most personal level. The question is, would I feel comfortable spending the next 7 or 8 months of my life making that film? And the answer was no, I don't think so, because I would be unhappy about some of the things that I would have to do to make the film work.
Would it be accurate to describe your position or your decision to turn down that film, which I had no idea about? Was that a political decision?
I would say it was a social decision. I don't know if it was political. I suppose political, but more social. I was more concerned about doing justice to what events really took place. Mm-hmm. I think we all know that the FBI was not that readily involved, that J. Edgar Hoover was not that happy about having FBI men go down there at all, that his hand had to be forced to send the first FBI men down. And in the picture, they make it seem so simple. When they run into a problem, they go to a phone booth, and they need 100 more men, and the next day there are 100 more FBI men down there. It simply was not the case. And there were no blacks in the FBI, as we know, except for Hoover's driver, his chauffeur. And when they do bring down a black agent, he's a terrorist. He comes down with a razor blade, and he's going to do terrible things to the mayor of the town if the mayor doesn't give him the information he needs. So he becomes a vigilante. And I just think it's a distortion of what's right.
Just a couple of more questions, and then we'll turn it over to
the picture was well done. And I mean that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very slick, good filmmaking, and it pleases audiences, because right wins out in the end, you see. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, just a couple more questions, and we'll turn this over to the panel. Is there a dream project that Leonard Nimoy, as a filmmaker, would like to do and has dreamed of doing but hasn't gotten together yet?
I wish there was, because I'm in a position today, and I don't know how much longer I'll be in that position, to probably get it done.
You can do whatever you want, sure.
Probably. And I really wish there was some very specific and wonderful dream project that I've had for many, many years, and now finally I have the cachet to get it made. The answer is no. I'm reading a lot of scripts. We read several scripts a week, and many of which will be movies. In the next, be made into movies in the next 4, 6, 8, 10 months. I haven't made a choice yet. I have several projects, as we say, in development. 3 or 4 ideas of mine that are in development in various places and in various stages, any one of which could become a movie, or any 2 or 3 of which could be made into movies in the next 2 or 3 years. But I don't have one dream all-time project, no.
Let me ask a more general question then. Is there some overwhelming statement, some kind of social cause, some...
Not any one, no, not any one. I'm at the mercy of what happens to me on a week-to-week basis, what I read on a week-to-week basis, what I'm exposed to, and for that reason, the development process is I find very painful and very difficult, because on a given day, I may read about an idea or be told about an idea or experience something which I decide I really want to make into a movie. That's a terrific subject and important and worthwhile, worth making the investment and expending the energy. Let's do it. So you go to the studio and say, here it is, and they say, oh yeah, and they see your passion, and they see what you're after. Say, okay, we will put up the money and we'll get a script written on this subject. Now, from that point on, it can take several months to the time you get the story laid out, you get the writer you want, and he gets started on, or she gets started on the script. And in the meantime, you might go off and do another movie. And while you're doing another movie, your life is changing drastically. I am deeply affected by each movie I make. I have literally awakened to find myself in tears as a result of a scene I'm shooting this week in a movie. I'm deeply affected by it. But by the time that picture's finished, I'm a different person. And I may be so different that I'm no longer at all interested in the subject that I just put into development 4 or 5 months ago. I may look at it and say, why did I want to do that? That's over. That's done. I've touched on enough of that in this film or whatever, you know. So it's a tricky process, and I'm new to it. It's only been the last 3 or 4 years that I've been involved with this particular kind of process, and I'm learning as I go.
Do you feel that, on balance, if you look at the body of work that's coming out of Hollywood, that work is having an elevating effect on American society, a negative effect, or basically is just irrelevant entertainment? I'm not trying to say choose one of the above, but how would you describe the impact?
I can't, look, I try to be loyal to my industry and my friends in it. I cannot honestly sit here tonight and say to you, we are helping the world with our movies. We are bettering mankind with our movies. We are in touch with all of the things that we should be dealing with, and they're being dealt with well. I can't say that. It's, on the other hand, it's too easy to Hollywood bash. It's always been easy to Hollywood bash and to blame Hollywood for our ills. I think there's a mutual problem here, and I don't know how well I can express this tonight, but I do believe that there's a mutuality of failure, that the audience is not demanding enough, and nor are the studios reaching high enough in terms of the product they want to deliver. I do believe that audiences do want to not to be challenged, but to be told what the problem is and to be shown a hero or heroine fixing it, dealing with it, so that in a sense they empathize, they have a catharsis, they go through the problem without ever having dealt with it themselves, and come away feeling, well, wow, I'm glad that problem is solved.
Yes, Spock and Kirk took
yeah,
care of
I'm
it,
glad they did that. Boy, I feel a lot better about that, and that was fun, and that kind of thing. I don't think any of us are rising to the occasion, frankly.
Do you? Well, of course, you're right about the audience. But do you feel that the values within our community, if I may say that, within the filmmaking community, within the creative community in the film industry, that those values accurately reflect or reflect in any way the values of society at large, or are they at variance somehow?
Well, I think you have an extraordinary range. I think there are some people in our industry who are simply want to hit the home run ball every time up if possible, and that means cookie cutter kind of movies, formula movies, movies that do exactly what the audience wants them to do, and they will be repetitions of previous films. For example, after 48 Hours was successful, or well, I'll go back to Beverly Hills Cop, a more obvious choice. After Beverly Hills Cop was so successful, a black, gritty Detroit cop comes to clean, sanitized Beverly Hills to work with the police department there. Fish out of water story is what we call it in our business. I must have read a half-dozen scripts of cops who were in the wrong city, you know, including one that's on my desk right now, of three cops who are sheriffs and brothers in Texas who go to Monte Carlo. I could go on with variations on this theme that are being made. These movies will be made. They're being made all the time. Then you get the odd couple buddy cops,
yes,
like 48 Hours, which was Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. People who really don't like each other but are forced to work with each other.
Like Mississippi Burning.
That's right.
Same movie.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And at the end comes to kind of a mutual respect, you see, they discover the values in each other. There's a lot of that stuff going on, and there are people who are going to make that stuff because it'll be programmed out there. It'll get out there, and there'll be an audience come to see it. There's very little risk in that kind of film.
We were talking earlier today about the most frequently used machine in Hollywood, obviously, is a Xerox machine. It's but two final questions here. What do you...
To be fair, I didn't say that on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who are doing unique material and dangerous financially. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But there are people who are committed to that kind of work.
And if I may say so, I think The Good Mother is a very good example.
Thank you.
Was not a film that was a safe commercial bet by any means.
Dangerous.
Two last questions. Number one, what do you think it is? You know, you're doing what almost every actor or actress that I know wants to do what you're doing right now. They would rather be directing, making movies, shaping movies. What do you think it is that it takes for an actor to make this transition as wonderfully successfully as you have done, from acting in front of the camera to serving behind the camera?
Well, in my case, I was a lot better prepared for the job than most people were aware. I had already made sizable investments in energy, time, study. I had done a lot of theatrical directing. I had been on sound stages for almost 40 years in one capacity or another, mostly acting, but I had been doing it. I had spent a lot of time in editing rooms on various projects, watching a film go together piecemeal, piece by piece from the footage that had been shot. I had taught acting classes for 5 years, so I really was in touch with how to help an actor or an actress in a scene. I had a lot of camera work. I had done a lot of my own camera work, so I was very much in touch with lenses and composition and so forth. I was very well prepared. It takes a sense of theatricality. It takes a sense of the dynamic of how one scene follows another in film. It takes a sense of what to do when a scene is flat on the sound stage and nothing's happening. The actors are doing it, but there's no fun in it, there's no charm in it, there's no tension in it. They've missed the point, perhaps, or perhaps the scene is badly written and needs to be rewritten. Some sense of the drama. For me, history of drama helps because the roots are there, whether it's in Beverly Hills Cop or whether it's in Oedipus Rex. The roots are there. Directing is for me, a great challenge because it draws on every skill, every sensibility, every bit of education you've ever had in your life. It draws on all of it.
Final question, and then we turn it over to the panel, who will give you a rough time, I know. Is there one movie that you've seen recently that you looked at it and you said, gee, I wish I had taken that script. I wish that was a movie I wish I had done or could have done. Anything that sticks in your mind?
Well, you tend to go to the big hits, you know. I'm jealous of Barry Levinson's work. I think he's a very good filmmaker.
Yes, he is.
And I don't know if Rain Man is his best, but it certainly is a successful handling of that material in terms of what the audience can take with that material. I think one can find flaws, one can find fault with the way the Dustin Hoffman character is used, almost to the edge of exploitation, almost. His problem is almost exploited, but the film is successful. It's good filmmaking. On the other hand, I'm frankly disappointed in Mike Nichols. I think Working Girl is a good film. It's solid, all the values are there, but I think a Mike Nichols should do better somehow. I don't think I'm as good a filmmaker ever will be in terms of social vision as a Mike Nichols, because he's been at it for so long and he has his own perception. And somehow I don't think there's anything unique or Mike Nichols about that movie. It's a successfully made, put together film, good carpentry. I don't know. I'd have to do some more thinking about the films that are out. I have not seen Liaison Dangereuse. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I'm looking forward to that. People whose taste I respect tell me that it's a very good picture. I don't have a really good answer to your question, I'm afraid. That's the best I can do at the moment.
Well, let me conclude my section of this by saying that I know that you're always looking for material. I know that a very inspiring story that you may want to consider is the Hillsdale College story, which is full of... It's full of drama, it's full of controversy, and full of heroes who win.
That's great.
So, with that, having said that, let's turn it over to Mark and to the panel for...
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Evans. I'm moderating the panel this evening. I'm a composer and writer, and I have a newspaper column in the New York City Tribune called Mark My Words. My colleagues on the panel this evening will include, to my left, Chuck Moss of the Detroit News. Next to him, Steve Advocat, staff writer for the Detroit Free Press. and finally Jim Lyons of the Hillsdale Daily News. Michael, before going over to Mr. Nimoy, I might add that apropos of your remark about the Xerox machine being the most used one in Hollywood, this has been going on for times even before the invention of Xerox. Dorothy Parker, way back when, said the only ism in Hollywood anyone cares about is plagiarism. And some of that is still true today. Mr. Nimoy, the name of this event, this conference, is Popular Entertainment and its impact on society. And one of the subjects that we've been pursuing is an interesting one, the extent to which the values that appear in popular entertainment represent an influence on our society or a reflection of that society. There have been certainly cases, a study recently by the National Institute of Health that has suggested that television provides role models for both parents and children who acknowledge deriving much of their sense of values from the entertainment industry. We know that people are interested in what actors wear, how they behave in their personal lives, and also the sense of right and wrong, the sense of meaning, the sense of moral worth that appear in films, or lack of moral worth on occasion. And there is a running debate going on. You mentioned those people who are cultural critics who place a lot of blame on Hollywood and on the entertainment industry. There are defenders, of course, of the industry who would say that the industry is merely reflecting that which already exists in society. Others would say that the industry is not just a mirror, but that is in fact a primary stimulus and a prime mover. I've suggested on occasion, and I'd like to ask you to comment on this, that in fact both realities are to a certain extent true, that the industry certainly is a tremendous influence on society, but also given a period when the family has declined and there is something of a vacuum in our society for other reasons, people within the industry are also a part of our society and reflect the values that are evolving within it. I'd like to ask you how you see the question of Hollywood and the entertainment industry as either a stimulus or as a reflector, and whether you feel that your view, I'll ask this in two parts, your view, and whether you feel that your view is shared by the money people, the executives, the governing board, if you will, that decide what pictures are made, which networks are going to produce which products. That's essentially the essence of the conference in which we've been engaged, and we would appreciate very much your sharing us your view of that.
Well, I think you're right. I think it operates in both directions. I think life imitates art and art imitates life. There's no easy answer here. I'm sure we must all accept that. You can discuss, but there's no easy answer. One of the reasons that there's no easy answer is because Hollywood is not one mind, nor is television even one mind, or motion pictures one mind. There is a very, very wide range of tastes, attitudes, needs, perceptions, and so forth. I have a project which I brought to one of the networks about 2 years ago, and they agreed that they would like to develop it and go ahead with it. We have a script. I was just told about 2 weeks ago that they have decided they don't want to do this project, and I'm frankly not sure why. It is of a kind of subject matter. I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but I did, having let out the word to some people that I'm connected with, that this project is now available. I'm no longer connected with that particular network. The word comes back to me that Network X is interested in doing some good stuff, meaning something of social importance, quality. That makes a statement about that I think speaks to some of these issues. What it says is that Network Y has chosen not to, but Network X is interested in that right now. Network Y may feel they've done enough good stuff this year, and now they're looking for something like The Naked Lie, starring James Farentino and a girl who plays a hooker, you know. I watched about 5 minutes of that about 10 days ago. I was amazed. I don't watch that kind of stuff. I don't have time, frankly. It's not a question of taste. I don't have the time. But because I do have this television project, and I thought, I wonder what they're buying. What are they doing? In the first 3 or 4 minutes, I see a judge, played by James Farentino, involved with a prostitute, played by Victoria Principal, and down to his G-string. I was amazed at the semi-nudity, down to his G-string, And in walks a guy with a camera, starts shooting pictures. Out comes a gun, and the next thing you know, somebody's dead, and the judge is in with great exposition, done bang, bang, bang like that. You've got a judge involved with a prostitute being bribed, and somebody's dead.
All the elements.
Yeah, right. You know. And it's like 3 minutes, and they've got that much of the story out. It was amazing storytelling. Okay, so there's that kind of taste. They probably get very big numbers doing that kind of thing. Why is that? I mean, who wants to see it? There must be people who want to see that stuff. On the other hand, last night I watched for quite a while the TV piece about the development of the bomb, and I don't think it was sensationalized or trivialized at all. I thought it was a remarkably in-depth study of all these characters and their motivations and the politics of the case and the science of the case. So we're looking at a very wide range of stuff, and I can't tell you, I'm not an authority on what the numbers were last night as compared to Naked Lie with James Ferrantino. I don't know. One would hope that there were a lot of people watching last night and really interested, but I can't guarantee that. So there are a lot of different kinds of work being done for a lot of different reasons at a lot of and at different times. And I do believe that there are times when you can go to a network and say, I have an idea, and I can show you why this idea has merit on the basis of the numbers, because X number of millions of people are involved in this kind of activity, and this is a film about that activity, so they will be interested. And they'll listen to that, on the one hand. On the other hand, there may be some new idea that is bubbling on the edge of social consciousness that you could take to a network or to a studio, and they might say, yeah, you're right. I think that's an idea whose time is coming. Perhaps it's not yet come, but is coming. Let's investigate that. Let's explore it and do it. I think there are all kinds. But I think the individual finally has to decide for him or herself, which way do I want to go? Why am I in this thing?
I think one of the interesting things to observe here, you'll pardon me, is that the series that Mr. Nimoy is talking about the development of the atomic bomb, was produced by Aaron Spelling, who has given the world Charlie's Angels, The Love Boat, and other important contributions to Western civilization in the past. So sometimes quality product from surprising and unexpected sources.
Mr. Nimoy, I'm going to drop the dirty boot and mention the science fiction angle, hopefully without inducing you to jump off the podium and begin throttling me. I'm 35 years old. I remember growing up in the 50s and the 60s, and one of the staples of popular culture was the world of the future, was this confident, bright, happy future, a better world which we would inevitably create, generally by the far future date of around 1979. Now here it is, it's 1989, it's supposed to be the world of the future, and yet, as you said, here we are, and all the audience seems to want is reassurance, as you said, of certainty. They want the good mother to confront the situation and win or fight nobly. The audience, there don't seem to be any images anymore of a confident, better world. At least I don't see very many of them. Even in this Star Trek extrapolation, it's kind of a fear of ecological disaster. My question is, what does that say about the condition of the country or the mentality of people today, that instead of sort of a confident vision of where we're going, people want reassurance?
We've been through some devastating times, I think, as a civilization in the last couple of decades. I think we've been shown the frailty of the society and the planet, and I think we're looking for some kind of reassurance that both will survive. When I was in the research that I did for Star Trek IV, I talked to a lot of scientists about their concerns or expectations or hopes for the immediate future. What exciting breakthroughs do you think might happen in the next 10 or 15 years? What great problems do you foresee in the next 10 or 15 years? I had a wide range of answers, including a very highly respected scientist who told me that he expects that we will make contact with another intelligence by the end of this century. And I was quite startled by that. He's very serious about it. I wonder whether that's good or bad. I don't know how we'll handle that.
Do you think
But-
they're getting our television up there?
I don't know. But my point is this, that scientists are concerned, for example, that there is a feeling that things aren't good with the planet. There's a sense that we cannot deal with all of the problems simultaneously, that therefore there's a question of priorities, that there's the politics of the situation and the economics of the situation, that the politicians have to decide at some point, yes, there's enough, I have enough of a mandate from my constituents that they want that fixed. They want that problem stopped. And if we announce that we're going to spend a lot of money to fix it, my people will go for it because they feel that we've gone as far down the road as we can with that. So the scientists are concerned that on a given day, a problem that they have been talking about, complaining about, concerned about, will reach that point where the citizenry says, fix it. And the politicians say, right. And they turn to the scientists and say, fix it. And the scientist has to say, we can't anymore. It's gone too far. We don't have the means right now. We can start working with the money you give us or whatever. You get the point. That the prioritizing of our concerns is becoming a concern. And there is a sense of uneasiness. You know, you read in the newspaper suddenly that there's an ozone problem, that the layer is disappearing rapidly. And now there's a report that there's a major international conference which says, yes, we agree, let's fix it. Boy, it feels like a Band-Aid to me, like just in time, just before the patient gets seriously ill and perhaps unredeemably ill. So I personally feel that way. I have that concern. I don't have that sense of, oh boy, we can do anything. Having lost the war for the first time, I think our citizens feel less than unbeatable, obviously. These are concerns that I think have affected all of us. And maybe in all fairness to our society, that's why we want to be told, hey, everything's okay. Go see a movie, enjoy yourself, and watch the problem be fixed. Go home feeling better. Don't take the problem home with you. We'll fix it at the theater for you.
The 1930s.
Yeah, exactly. It is historical that when times are bad, films do well, particularly escapist films. When people have problems, they want to go to see a movie and be made to feel good.
Good evening, Mr. Nimoy.
Have I depressed all of you?
There was a woman recently from a Detroit suburb sat down with her 3 young children and watched Married with Children, was incensed by it.
I have to plead ignorance because I've never seen the show.
It's
But go ahead.
Well, she sent her children out and she watched it, and it's an adult comedy on the Fox network. And she started a one-woman letter writing campaign to get that show and others that she finds objectionable off the air. And last year, Martin Scorsese released a film about Jesus Christ that offended many people who picketed the film throughout its theatrical run. And my question is, how do you balance making projects which, on the one hand, may offend people, with at the same time trying to raise consciousness? Are there any topics that Hollywood just should not touch?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any topic that should be taboo, censored. You don't talk about that or deal with it. We, particularly in television and films, the individual has the right not to buy a ticket, not to go see it, turn to another channel, and I believe that. I think it's an easy out, and I think some people take it as an easy out, but I think it happens to be true. You don't have to buy that book, you don't have to read that book, you don't have to watch that TV show. And the question is, at what point do you have the right to prevent others from seeing, hearing, experiencing that thing that you find objectionable? The society sets standards, and there are community standards as well. And in some communities, the standards are different than others. I think that's valid. You establish your community, or you choose your community. You're entitled to have some sense of expectation of what the experiences are going to be within that community. And if you don't like it, you move to another community. But we are still a democracy, and must be. And I think that that's important that somebody have the right to speak out on an issue as they see fit, and nobody has to listen if they don't want to. It's difficult. I sympathize with both sides, but I finally come down on the side of they must be allowed to do it. That's my sense of it.
Follow-up question on that. would you be interested if someone approached you to direct the movie version of the Satanic Verses? Or would that be a pass?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
And
That's a sad, terrible
oh,
problem.
it's
Terrible
terrible. That's
problem.
awful. Yeah, but
Terrible problem. No, the answer is no.
because of concerns for your own safety, or because
Well,
of concerns for spending?
I'd say the first place I haven't read it yet.
Right.
And when I do read it, if I do, it's going to take me quite a while to understand what it means to those people who are offended by it. I will have an entirely different reaction to it than they, and I would have to make an intense investigation of what concerns them in order to make an intelligent decision about whether or not to do it. See, in an interesting way, if I may say so, I find it fascinating that Mississippi Burning was made by an Englishman, Alan Parker. I don't know where he was in the 60s. I was here, you see. And I don't know where he was. And maybe that's the way it had to happen, that somebody who was from thousands of miles away and from a different society, who was not emotionally involved, subjectively, physically involved, maybe he could make it. I couldn't.
Well, see, my rather flippant question is getting then to an important point. You would then agree that there is certain kind of material that would be so deeply offensive to some people that you would decline to participate.
Why did Rushdie write it? That's the question.
Well, that's his problem. I mean, I'm not
Yes,
sure.
it is his problem. Yes, you're right.
Major problem.
It is his problem. But what I'm saying is that maybe there's some passionate filmmaker who believes in that particular piece of material. You have the right to. I think, I'm really speaking out of ignorance here. I haven't read the material, and I don't know. Obviously, some people are deeply, deeply offended by it.
I would say so.
But including Cat Stevens, But well, there's an interesting incident in L.A. Have you heard about it? Have
Tom
you
Lakis,
been
yeah.
away? About Jeff Edwards.
Yeah.
You know about that?
Yes.
There's a TV radio personality in L.A. on a particular radio station who's one of these garbage kind of guys who, in order to get some heat going, has decided that he was going to have all his listeners send in their Cat Stevens records, and they would burn all this material. And there was going to be a public burning of Cat Stevens' record because Cat Stevens agreed that Rushdie should die. And one of his colleagues on the station has a talk show, and on that colleague's talk show, there was a promo for this other talk show host's record burning. And his colleague Jeff Edwards refused to have it aired on his spot because he said that's terrorism, and I won't have it. I won't promote his burning of records, even though I agree that Cat Stevens is wrong, you see. And he had to leave the station, gave up his job at the station. Well, that's a question of personal choice.
Yeah, Jim Lyons from the Daily News. Thank you for coming tonight, by the way. Now, we used to sort of sit down on Catholics a little bit in this country. We used to not see their way as a general population. There was the WASP view. Now, we're seeing that we have a very mixed country, and Rushdie is a good case of it. We are not looking at his book from the point of view of a man who is breaking away from his religion, as many, many people have done here in the United States. And I was wondering, we were talking earlier, and I was listening to these guys, these big, important newsmen, that we've got Clint Eastwood, and we've got all of the white male leads who do fantastic things, never get shot, or if they do, they struggle through. But we just don't seem to be able to produce a hero or a real survivor from any other race. So it seems that we've narrowed our point of view through television, I don't know, and through movies.
I'm sorry to jump in. What would you call Eddie Murphy? What would you call Danny Glover? in Lethal Weapon?
I think we've integrated in a lot of ways, but I also think a lot of it has been token. I think Eddie Murphy just loves to, he's a different character. He's always enjoyed that playing with the white guy's head. And
Does pretty well with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the answer is that I'm not sure you're absolutely accurate, really. I understand the question. The question has validity, but I'm not sure that it is really, really true. I think again, it feels like those guys out there can't do anything but make a white man hero, and I'm not sure that's entirely true. I'm very curious about this. I've had just received a project, an offer of a project, called Judge D. There is in Chinese history a very famous judge who was a kind of a Sherlock Holmes detective on his own, who went out and investigated his own cases. Very famous in Chinese history. And there have been some books written about him, and I have been submitted this project. And I say to myself, to either act in or direct, and I say to myself, do we want to see a Chinese judge in China in the period, 1600s or whatever, investigating cases? I think the answer is, if it's well done, yes. But one has to stop and wonder. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. I do think that there are exceptions to your rule, though. Not a lot, but there are some.
You know, that raises another interesting question. You've obviously played people from another planet, a person from another planet. Would you feel, you said you were offered this to act in, would you feel comfortable doing a makeup transition and playing an Asian?
Physically comfortable? No, I wouldn't.
But would you feel
No.
Would you feel comfortable as
It's a good question. Good
a white person impersonating
Good
an
question.
Asian person?
There's also a project called Black Elk Speaks, which Black Elk is I'm just getting to know, a very revered figure in Indian history. He was a religious leader of the Indian people, and there was a play called Black Elk Speaks, and there was a script for a film called Black Elk Speaks, and I have been asked to play the lead, and I had this intense discussion with the people who brought it to me, who claimed to speak for the Sioux Nation, who claimed the Sioux Nation said, yes, if he plays it, that will sit well with us. You see. Now, I find that very flattering, but I don't feel terrific about it. I have played Indians. I don't know if this audience is aware. I played Indians. I played Indians in Gunsmoke, in Wagon Train, in a number of television westerns, and even in some films, up until the early '60s. And somebody raised my consciousness and said, "Hey, it's not too terrific. You know, there are Indians around who'd like to have the job, and maybe do a better job of representing their race than you are." You know, because as a matter of fact, the very first job that I had as an Indian was in don't laugh.
I'm sorry, it's just the phrase, my first job as an Indian.
Yes. It was in 1950. It was in a picture called The Old Overland Trail with Rex Allen, the Arizona cowboy, his wonder horse Coco, and the Indian was a savage Indian that I was asked to play. And the reason I got the job was because it had been offered to Iron Eyes Cody, an Indian actor who refused to play it. And I got the job. You know, I wasn't thinking about, well, gee, I should be playing nasty Indians.
Well, it's better than playing the Wonder Horse Coco. That's
member of our panel who arrived a few minutes late. We'll ask you, sir, please identify yourself and ask your question. And that's not supposed to sound like a message that would be coming out of a congressional committee. You're welcome here.
Thank you. Mr. Nimoy, I'm Mike Rosenbaum from Detroit Jewish News. I'd like to get back to something you mentioned before about how deeply you were affected by the idea of directing certain scenes. Did you go through the same process as an actor? And if not, why not?
Yes, I do go through the same process as an actor. I tend to assimilate the condition that I'm dealing with. It tends to become part of me. I live with it. If you're on one of these jobs, you're on it maybe 12 hours a day physically, maybe 16, 18 hours a day mentally, and I can't help but be affected by it. I'm in a much better mood when I'm doing comedy than I am when I'm doing tragedy. And I was aware, particularly when we were making the Star Trek series, when we went months at a time, many months at a time, of shooting. On the films, it's 10 weeks and you're done. But particularly on the series, I was conscious of the fact that on Saturdays, I would still be in the Spock mode on a day off. Sunday afternoon, I would start to relax a little bit, get a little loose, you know. But on Saturdays, I was still quite rigid, and I was still doing Spock in my personal life. for better or worse.
Must have been a lot of fun for your family.
No, it was not a lot of fun. Yes, it does happen to me. I get deeply immersed in the process. Yeah.
As a director, do you get immersed in different characters, maybe on different days, depending what scene you're going to shoot, or do you identify with one
No.
character?
As a director, I think my connection is with the overview. It's not with any one particular character at any one time. It's with a sense of what the nature of the material is. It's been widely reported. I told a reporter about it 3 or 4 months ago, and it was widely printed that during the making of The Good Mother, I woke up one night in tears and grabbed for a piece of paper and a pencil, and I wrote down 3 words, and the words were, "It's about loss." I had gone through some very personal losses around that time, not long before that. And I suddenly realized that was what this film was putting me in touch with, was my own sense of loss. So it was a very moving experience for me. On the other hand, I felt good about the fact that I was so much in touch with the process and aware of the fact that I was in touch with the process. It's a creative life.
I know that we have some questions from members of our audience. Again, we should remind you that we are videotaping this, and in order to hear your question, we'll ask you to please raise your hand, but wait until someone approaches you with a microphone. If you ask your question and no one is near you with a microphone, we won't be able to hear you, or if we hear you, it won't be preserved for posterity on videotape. So please raise your hand and wait, and someone will be over with a mic.
I'm curious about your feelings towards Walt Disney Company with respect to their rather unique image in Hollywood to the public of high morals and ethics. And secondly, what is attributed to their great success in comparison to
the Disney Company? Okay, that's a multi-level question, really. The people who are now managing the Disney Company, the people that I deal with, the current management, were the management at Paramount when we were making the first 3 Star Trek films there. Eisner and Katzenberg were the people who actually hired me to direct Star Trek 3 and hired me to direct Star Trek 4. Then they left while we were making Star Trek 4, and they became the management at Disney. And they there hired me to do 3 Men and a Baby and The Good Mother. Now, they are extremely hardworking. They are, you ask about their success. They're extremely hardworking. They are very, very bright. I think they have a great sense of audience, great sense of an audience. They are trying to broaden the nature of their product in films. The Good Mother was I think, probably the first step in that direction, to get away from a certain kind of movie, get away from an identification with a certain predictable kind of movie and to move into some other kinds of territory. Not successful, unfortunately, and I just hope it doesn't cause them to pull in their wings and go back to the more reliable kind of product. On another level, it's Michael Eisner who is now in charge of all the Disney parks and so forth and that sort of thing, and that's an incredibly successful, incredibly popular part of our culture. And not just the American culture, but the world culture. They're opening parks in France, and with great success. And Mickey Mouse has just been to China and Russia, and being well received wherever he goes. And it's an incredible thing to me to be around that. I went last week to Disneyland in Southern California because there was a program for the families of the Challenger shuttle that was destroyed in that accident, and they were being honored, and they have started an educational program in connection with the Challenger, and they were there and had asked me to come and introduce them, and I went through the park. I hadn't been to the park for some time, and I'm in awe of that kind of commonality, of a sensibility of entertainment, what people want to see, what people enjoy. And this is there's no question about it. They have something that people want. They're in touch with something that people want and will flock to see. There's a magic about it that draws people to it like a magnet. It's incredible. Walt Disney did have that sensibility, that sense of taste.
Yes, considering the fact that Star Trek was canceled and then went on syndication to become one of the most popular television series of all time, and that we see more and more people turning to public television and videotapes and cable these days, do you think that the networks are doing justice to the American public in the context of an entertainment industry?
Help me. How do you put Star Trek in that context? Where does it fit in the question?
Well, the fact that it gained such great popularity after it was canceled.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, I don't think they knew what we were. I don't think the network really understood what we were. I think the audience was ahead of the network. And on the other hand, there are certain, I think, technical factors that and historical factors that helped Star Trek to become eventually the tremendous syndication success that it was. In 1966, when we went on the air, we had not yet put a man on the moon. We were canceled in 1968 after 3 seasons. In 1969, you could walk outdoors of your house one evening, as I did, and look up at that planet up there and know that there was a human being standing on that planet for the first time. I think that really changed the American audience's perception of science fiction, and I think it affected Star Trek a lot. And the other major factor, and it was technical, and perhaps we were more in touch with our time, was that around 1971, 72, the show was being syndicated, and that meant that local stations could put it on at the time of their choosing, at the time that they felt that there was an audience for it. When we were on the network, the stations couldn't do that. They had to put it on at the hour the network fed it, and those hours were not well chosen. The network's taste for the show was not right. The very first episode they put on the air, they chose a creature episode, which really gave some sense of what they were hoping for. They were hoping for a monster show. And the show was anything but a monster series. So we were out of sync with them right from the very start. I think eventually the audience told the stations that they wanted to see the show and when they wanted to see the show. And you could watch the show at Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, Saturday morning at 9, every night at 6, you know, that kind of thing. And suddenly the audience was there.
While we're providing the next questioner with a microphone, just to make a brief comment about your question, you're absolutely correct that the networks are losing total share of the audience, and it's going to cable and to independent stations and to Fox. But you also mentioned public television. Now, I work on public television. I host a show on public television. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, our audience is not increasing. In fact, I think people have suggested very rightly that given the problems that Mr. Rushdie, Salman Rushdie, has at the moment, if he wanted to hide out where no one would find him, he should host a weekly series on PBS. He'd be safe.
I'm John Sherwood. I'm with the Battle Creek Enquirer. In view of the fact that you had somewhat criticized Mike Nichols for his failure to bring out a real social vision, or what you perceive as his social vision in Working Girl, I wonder what your perception is of the duty of the individual artist, be he director or actor, to realize what he defines as a social consciousness within him so that the audience perceives it. How far must that go with each project? Is it his responsibility to choose such projects, for example?
Well,
Just say yes.
Yes. Obviously, the ideal would be that every time that person gets up to bat, he hits the ball well. It doesn't work that way in baseball, and it's not going to work that way in the arts either. Your greatest home run hitter doesn't do it every time. There's a question of percentages involved. I don't know what the origin of that project was, and I'm probably being unfair to Mr. Nichols for sitting here speaking ill of his work. I admire. The problem is that I admire him so much, and here's a film that's perfectly workable, perfectly acceptable. But I don't think it really gives us anything special or exciting about Mike Nichols' view of the world.
Which of his films would you say do that?
Well, Carnal Knowledge, for example, and so many others. But let's face it, this is a formula movie. This is a female Rocky comes from across the river and comes into New York and makes it. You know, I could have made it, and therefore I say, Mike, do better because you're a better filmmaker than I am, more experienced, wiser, more sophisticated than I am. It's an anomaly. It's just one of those things. He'll probably come up with a brilliant film next year, and that'll be that. He's done great work, and I certainly don't want to denigrate his career based on this successful movie. He's made a successful film.
I'd like to ask your opinion on a subject that we've touched on a lot in the last 2 days. I'm going to use for an example the Last Temptation of Christ. This is a movie that obviously offends a lot of people, but taking that totally, not considering that at all, the fact that it offends people, the people that I've talked to that have seen the movie, every one of them have told me that it's a totally boring movie in itself, not to mention the fact that it did terrible in the box office. Now, what I want to know is your opinion on why does Hollywood do movies like this with, they have to have some idea that it's going to bomb when they're doing it.
Try to remember what I said before, that Hollywood is not a person. Hollywood did not do this movie. A certain particular group of people said, yes, we will give you the money. Others said no. So that tells you immediately that Hollywood is not a person. It is not Hollywood that did the movie. Some man someplace who had the authority to say, yes, we'll do that movie, made a personal, very human decision. That project was at Paramount, and in pre-production at Paramount. And they decided against going forward with it for whatever reasons. Either they thought it was too controversial or too risky financially or whatever. Somebody at Paramount said, no, we will not go forward with this. And Marty Scorsese had that project in hand and begging for the money for some years and from a number of sources. So it wasn't Hollywood that decided to make it. It was a human being on a given day made a decision. And I'm sure that that person felt a number of things, that person or persons felt a number of things. That Scorsese is a good filmmaker, Scorsese has a passion for this subject, and that passion will probably be reflected in the film. The title is a well-known title. It was a successful book. There may very well be an audience that wants to see this film.
I can add just a little bit to that because I've done quite a bit of research about this film and how it, as we know from having heard me last night. The fact is that not only was that film at Paramount, it was not only turned down at Paramount, it was also turned down at Warner's. And Universal green-lighted it, went ahead with the picture, because Martin Scorsese was hot coming off Color of Money, which was quite a successful film, and they made it as part of a package deal. They wanted to get Scorsese's next 2 pictures, and as a condition of getting those pictures with Scorsese, he, the director, insisted, well, in that case, you got to give me $6 million, and that's all he took to make Last Temptation, and they did, based upon the director and the idea of getting this package with him.
Let me just say this. I can understand why some people would be offended by that film. And I can understand why some people would be bored by the film. I can understand other people saying that's a great piece of work and the man should have a right to do it. What troubles me is people condemning something that they have not seen or read. That troubles me a lot. And there was a lot of that on that film. People refusing to see it because they found it offensive. I don't understand that.
Mr. Nimoy, I should tell you that last night when I spoke about the film, I asked if there was anyone in the audience who had seen Last Temptation of Christ. Only one person raised his hand, and he was wearing a Roman collar. It was a priest who was here on campus, so thought that was an interesting.
Now, understand me, if one chooses not to see it, that's one thing. But if one chooses that others should not see it because I have not seen it but find it offensive, that troubles me.
Rumor has it that Alfred Hitchcock, in directing the famous scene, the shower scene in Psycho, in order to get the facial expression that he wanted from the actress, he made sure he couldn't get that facial expression that he wanted, and in order to do so, he made sure that when the water came out, it came out ice cold. I was curious if you've ever manipulated an actor, actress, or scene in a similar fashion.
He's a cold director. mean director. No, I haven't done that kind of thing. Directors work in various ways. Hitchcock was never known to be an actor who cared a lot about a director who cared a lot about the art of acting. The actors for him were tools. They provided a service, a function that he found necessary in order to make his films. But I don't think he really had a serious or important relationship with his actors on an artistic level. I'm very much in touch with actors, coming from the persuasion and having taught actors a lot and understanding what kind of a contribution an actor can make given the opportunity. I'm very much in touch with opening up an atmosphere in which the actor feels safe to make a large investment and take chances.
Recently in Detroit, a young hockey player named Bob Probert was arrested at the border for attempting to smuggle cocaine into Canada, and he's already been expelled from the National Hockey League and possibly will never be able to play hockey again. Do you think that the actors and actresses in the Screen Guild, which I think is the union for actors and actresses, do you think that they should adapt similar, very stringent standards? Because as we've all heard tonight, there is such a strong impression that actors and actresses can make on us as a country, and wouldn't that be a wonderful statement to make to our country if they would voluntarily adapt standards that stringent themselves?
Wow.
Good question.
The movie stars through the years have come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, morally and ethically, as we know. And in some cases, for whatever reason, some stars have found themselves in obscurity for having gotten involved in some kind of questionable moral situation, or a situation that the audiences found questionable morally or ethically, and other actors and actresses have seemed to thrive on it. Flagrant about their personal lives and what their personal lives are about, and develop enormous followings. I don't think you can legislate that. What I find terribly, terribly painful is the growing knowledge that athletes who participate in a foot race, which should be the most equal kind of competition, the most basic kind of competition, one person running against another a given distance, have cheated. That I find so painful, and I think it's part of this conversation that we had earlier about our view of the world and ourselves these days. What can you believe in? I mean, if there's an extra meter or an extra foot or an extra leap available as a result of steroids, and one is using them and the other isn't, we suddenly discovered that the competition wasn't real. It wasn't real. And we invest so much emotion in the effort of these people, in their training and the progress of their careers, and in the event. We make such an investment in the human effort to be the best. Watching humans make this effort to be the best, I find it so painful to discover that there's this kind of cheating going on. Yeah, I think in athletics, where there are people's careers at stake, where there's money at stake, where there are endorsements and all that. You know, obviously, I think something's got to be done to clean up that act. I don't know if you can do it with actors and actresses.
Let me be a pain in the neck
Yeah,
and do
go
a follow-up on that. Given
Please.
everything that you've said, wouldn't you agree that actors, particularly the very successful screen actors, are even more role models for people than athletes, followed by even more millions of people than hockey players, and that if you're going to have this kind of standard, which you apparently support, for people in athletics, what about the star? Let's take an extreme example. A motion picture actor of some success who was arrested selling drugs to someone else. Would you say that that person should be terminated as a working actor?
I'm going to plead ignorance here. I don't know.
What studios could have not hired Dustin Hoffman because he was busted?
No. The point is that the question was very well asked. It is possible that SAG, Screen Actors Guild, could impose a standard where he would lose his membership in the guild.
Well, okay, but then the question becomes a legal question, doesn't it? Does the Screen Actors Guild have the legal right to do that? And if whoever the actor,
they can throw you out. They can throw you out for breaking a strike.
Oh, I think that's quite different. Quite different.
In other words,
so you have broken the rules of the union, and there is a rule that says if you break that particular rule, you can be expelled.
Then what if you have a rule in the union that says it's against the rules of the union?
Now you start to legislate that rule. You start to put that rule into effect and find out what the legalities are. Somebody's going to come along and say, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure we can do that because. And you're going to have to work out the question legally. And the question will be worked out legally based on the consensus of opinion in our society today in terms of what we want. Do we want that rule, that new rule? Do we feel it is necessary? Then it would become part of the society. But I'm not sure that I could speak to the issue of whether it's legal right now, and that's why I'd have to plead ignorance.
If I can suggest to the questioner, and I'll shut up on this, you should, we have a new drug czar in this country named William Bennett, and I think you should write to him with that suggestion. I think he would have a very interesting time with that.
It's obviously a very provocative question. I would remind you that there was a time when a career of a luminous star lady was destroyed. Her career was destroyed because she had an extramarital affair.
Ingrid Bergman.
That's right.
And the product
People forget that.
And the product of that affair is today one of the leading stars in movies,
Isabella Rossellini. I mean, Ingrid Bergman was at the height of her career when she had an extramarital affair with Rossellini in Italy, and she was out of the movie business. Unusable, unhireable. Audiences refused to see her, and times change.
Mr. Nimoy, I'd like to change the subject completely and address the issue of creativity in Hollywood and in society in general.
Question?
Well, it's going to be different. It seems to me the product that Hollywood sells is not only entertainment but creativity. And there's been a lot of discussion in recent years about how TV has a negative effect on children, for instance, in society in general, because the viewer is viewing and observing as opposed to engaging in a creative and productive activity themselves. And I'm wondering what your view is of Hollywood kind of being a, the electronic fireplace, or, that your product is really, being the devil's advocate, a negative one in a sense, that it has a negative impact on people. And I guess my question is by sitting in a theater watching a movie or sitting in front of the TV and watching TV, are people not engaging and being creative themselves? And to Hollywood's credit,
I think you're absolutely right. I would say you're absolutely right. There is nowhere near enough really creative work being done. There is too much non-creative work being done. There is too much kind of dumb stuff being done. There are dumb television shows. There are dumb movies, which are extraordinarily successful. I agree with that 100%. On the other hand, the question is, should the kids be sitting in front of TV watching that? And are they, because the parents find it easier to let them do that than to insist that the set is off during the week? You must be involved in some other kind of creative or educational process. You cannot watch that tonight. Now that becomes a tug of war and a battle in the house, which is a tough and painful battle. I know that. And it may be just easier to give in. So if bad television programming exists, does that mean Hollywood is at fault for not educating your children? You see? Where's the responsibility for making the choices? It's not easy. I know that. It's in the home, and you got the set or sets and the VCR or VCRs and the discs and all the rest of it. It's all there. Are we really doing a proper job in our homes of saying you can only use that for this purpose and at this time, and this other time must be set aside for what you're talking about, the education and the creativity?
You used a phrase, and I'll just comment on it briefly, video fireplace. One of the most alarming things that I have read and heard about recently is there was a best-selling video cassette called Video Fireplace, where it is 120 minutes of a crackling fire in a fireplace, and you plug it into your VCR, and there you are. Wherever you are in your condo or your apartment, you have a fire. So this is the extent to which we've become dependent on this machine. Run out to your stores and get it. You can also get Video Dog, and you can also get Video Baby, which has a little baby crawling around and going goo goo cuckoo, but not doing anything nasty.
Mr. Nimoy, I'm going to change the subject even further than she just did. I remember you did a series called In Search Of. I was just wondering, whatever happened to that?
Whatever happened to it was we did 7 years of it. We did about 160 or 170 episodes. It was extraordinarily successful television series. Sometimes informative, sometimes silly, sometimes hokey. I was thinking today, knowing that I was coming here, about an interesting phenomenon that I heard about while I was doing that series. There was a scientist named Alan Hynek, who was part of the Air Force Blue Book Commission, assigned to investigating UFOs, supposedly the scientific inquiry into the question. And Alan Hynek, when the Blue Book was published, came out with a book of his own which disproved the existence of UFOs. He went out on the road to publicize the book. And during the course of his trip around the country, he got a call from his publisher, and he told me this story. His publisher said, "The book is not selling. We have a problem. The problem is that people don't want to hear that UFOs don't exist. People are much more interested in the possibility that they do exist. Is it possible that in your public appearances on the subject of this book that you could leave some room for the possibility that UFOs do exist?" In Search Of was an extremely successful show which left that possibility open. Okay. We discovered that the audience really did not want to have any of that stuff disproved. What they wanted was stories from people who claimed to have seen UFOs. They wanted discussion about why people think UFOs exist and all that sort of thing. We always took pains to say we don't have any physical evidence that they exist, but here's a person who claims he was on one. Let's talk to him. You know.
But Mr.
We
Nimoy,
had a good time on that show.
I think you'll be delighted to know, and this is no joke, that Bigfoot has recently been sighted here in Hillsdale, Michigan.
Well, we did a show about Bigfoot, and I was delighted to discover that, in some counties in Washington State, it's illegal to shoot Bigfoot.
With a camera.
Hello, Mr. Nimoy. My name is Denise Welton. I'm a sophomore here, and I understand that this will be the last question for the evening. My question stems from some studying I've been doing in an English literature class. And recently, my English literature class read Wordsworth's poem entitled Michael. And the fulcrum of that poem was the building between a father and a son of a pile of rocks, which would be a sheep trough when the son returned from the city in an attempt to save the family from financial ruin. This pile was a sacred covenant between a father and son. And to simplify the poem, subsequently what happens is this covenant was broken. The experience of reading this poem was that in the future, whenever I will walk through the woods, I guess I'll never look the same way at a pile of rocks. Earlier, during the course of the interview, you alluded that your work with the Good Mother put you in touch with your own sense of loss. My question is twofold. What experience of a role as an actor or a director had the biggest impact on your personal life? It touched you or changed you so that you never perceived in a situation the same way? And also, what experience of a role as an actor or a director had you hoped would have an impact on society?
Okay, it's thought-provoking. I've had some extraordinary experiences as both actor and director, but I think I would be evasive if I didn't talk about the Spock experience, because of all the roles that I've played, of all the jobs that I've had as actor or director, obviously it's had the most profound effect on both my life and career, and the longest lasting effect, and very dramatic, the changes that I've experienced as a result of it. It changed me psychologically. Playing the character changed me psychologically. Certainly changed my lifestyle a lot. Very simply, it was the first steady job I ever had in my business. You know. I had been making a living as an actor and as a teacher for some years before Star Trek came along in 1966, but I had never had a job that lasted longer than 2 weeks. I was a freelance actor, meaning that you job around, you go from job to job. I had never had a job where my name was painted on the parking space. You know. In most cases, it's put on with chalk, if at all. You know. I starred in a movie in 1951, a little B movie that was made in 9 days, and my dressing room had Jane Nye's name on the door. You don't even remember who Jane Nye was. So it had a profound effect on me in a lot of ways, and still does, still does. And coming to the point of this evening, the impact on the society, I think, was enormous. I still constantly come up across people who tell me how much they were affected by the series or the character or both. And it's a very proud thing, because I think the effect essentially has been positive. It is sometimes still overwhelming when I see, well, last night I was watching 60 Minutes, and there was a segment on television over the years, and here were these very, very brief flashes of historical events in television, historical characters in television, and there was Spock, my old buddy, right there, bang, on 60 Minutes. And you understand who that is, and people understand where that character fits in the culture and what that's all about. You see Spock for President bumper stickers during presidential campaigns, you know, and people understand that. And beam me up, Scotty, there's no intelligent life down here, you know, that sort of thing. And we understand that. It's in the culture. It is in the culture. And not necessarily in a bad way. I think a lot of it is fun, and a lot of it is very healthy, because it stands, the character stands for, I think, for dignity, for self-realization, for achievement, for intelligence, logic, compassion, a lot of good things. So it's had an enormously profound effect on my life, and I'm sure will indefinitely.
To conclude, to take advantage of my position here, I want to first of all thank all of the questioners. As I sort of indicated to you privately, this is an extraordinary group at Hillsdale. The questioners are people who dared boldly to go where no questioners had gone before. And obviously not only an extraordinary group of questioners, but an extraordinary guest in the presence of Leonard Nimoy, the person of Leonard Nimoy. And speaking as a friend of Hillsdale, though not quite a member of the family, I'm sure that I speak for everyone here in expressing thanks to you and the hope that this will by no means be your last visit to this part of our planet.
Thank you very much.